Hello, so today I want to talk about the end of the nation state. We may have grown up thinking of certain countries with certain borders, but we forget that in the context of history, many nations are actually quite new. Germany and Italy, for example, as we now know them, are not even 200 years old. The USA is 250 years old, maybe. The nation-state as a model was born in large part out of the revolutions of the 17th, 18th and 19th centuries. Until the 19th century, the world was, in the words of tech author Jamie Bartlett, a sprawl of empires, unclaimed land, city-states and principalities, which travellers crossed without checks or passports. Wars, revolutions, industrial progress, and socialised welfare altered that. The survival of nations will depend on being able to raise sufficient funds to cover their spending. And while already running deficits, many leaders are trying to offset the rising tide of political discontent with greater spending programmes. Trump and Biden both promised huge spending. Boris, Sunak, everybody is at it. And this will increase the need for tax revenue when it is by no means certain these revenue sources will remain. Perhaps the beginning of this threat to the nation-state model can be traced back to the mid to late 1990s, when for the first time investment in intangibles overtook investment in physical assets. For centuries, economies had revolved around the production and consumption of physical things, from cars to cows to grain to gold. Today, the most valuable assets are non-physical and intangible. Software companies, brands, intellectual property, operating systems, unique supply chains, data. Even money itself is no longer tangible. Companies built around intangibles grow faster. If a system, Google's search engine, for example, works, it can scale much more rapidly than anything a physical company can offer. An app need only be uploaded once, but it can be downloaded millions of times. And this potential speed of growth attracts investment, and so the process accelerates. At the same time, the new non-profit business models of tech companies and their ability to locate themselves anywhere have given them the ability to pay less tax where others pay more, and so tech has the advantage there too. Low taxes mean more capital to invest and grow, so tech advances and becomes even more capable. Even computer power itself grows exponentially, doubling roughly every 2 years as costs fall. The power that technology companies wield within our society grows at a similarly extraordinary rate. Already the combined market cap of tech companies Microsoft, Amazon, Apple and Google is greater than the GDP of every country on Earth, except China and the US. As Karl Marx famously observed, when the dominant mode of production changes, so do the political and social structures. The nation-state and its tax systems were built up around a physical world. Even today, the UK doesn't include spending on market research and branding in its GDP. Unless nations adapt to the new world around them and the transition to digital, the very model of the nation-state is brought into doubt. Either they must find a way to tax intangibles while remaining competitive with other nations, or they must cut their spending. Otherwise, insolvency looms. Government insolvency, disruption of tax revenue, a potential crisis in the bond market, a loss of faith in national currencies. These are all very real possibilities in a world already awash with political discontent and desire for change. They are also recipes for revolution and civil war. Such a fate will be avoided by those nations that act first and adapt best to the realities of the new economic world around us. This also means adapting the way they govern and the services government provides. Smaller nations tend to be more nimble. Already signs of adaptation are present. We see nations such as Iceland, which actually crowdsourced its constitution. Estonia and Malta, even various Caribbean islands, embrace blockchain technology, for example, in both their tax laws and their government services, while others look on baffled. Smaller nations outperform larger rivals. Of the 10 richest nations in the world on a per capita basis, none has a population of more than 10 million. Of the 20 richest nations in the world, just 2, the US and Germany, have a population larger than 20 million. In 1950, however, the story was rather different. The US was probably the richest nation on Earth. Purchasing power parity data isn't accurate, but there would have been at least 4 countries in the top 10 with populations over 10 million. The US, Venezuela, Australia, Canada, and possibly the Netherlands, with Belgium, France and Argentina just missing out. Small has become economically beautiful. It was not always so. The trend towards smaller nation-states, with people wanting more local rule, is politically apparent as well. The UK voted to leave the European Union. Catalonia wants independence from Spain. In the last 25 years, Yugoslavia has become Bosnia and Herzegovina, Croatia, Kosovo, Macedonia, Serbia and Montenegro, and Slovenia. We will see many more incidences, though the path towards smaller states will not be easy. Spain has shown it will not allow Catalonian freedom. Brexit went toxic, with the main areas of dispute, customs union, access to the single market and the Irish border all being essentially tax issues. History has shown that it often takes some kind of revolution, insolvency, crisis or war to achieve change and the meaningful tax reform that comes with it. Governments rarely offer it voluntarily, but dwindling tax revenue will force hands. As nations fragment, the tax systems that follow will be determined by the chosen systems of rule, but every state will be competing for business. Those that will attract the most business will be the ones with strong private property laws and the most attractive tax rates to the new global citizens and companies. This competition will put further pressure on other nations to adapt their ways. As tech starts to replace government services, many are already turning to tech for their education, healthcare and transport. So does it open the door to lower government spending. But one suspects some kind of fiscal pressure will force it on most, rather than it being chosen voluntarily. In cultures where high levels of spending are entrenched, there will be great resistance to lower taxes. Many will try to implement higher rates of tax and new taxes, perhaps wealth taxes, mansion taxes, vacant homes taxes, or turnover taxes. More inflation taxes, which are not directly felt by a voting electorate, at least not at first, are inevitable. For example, the doctrines of modern monetary theory and so-called people's quantitative easing, in which governments create money to fund spending and thereby manage the economy, are gaining traction. Attempts to clamp down on tax evasion, tax avoidance and tax havens will become more strident. The collection of taxes will grow more aggressive and will include a growing moral argument already at work that you are somehow a bad person if you don't agree with high taxes or how they're spent. The same moral arguments were used on the medieval knights who didn't want to go to war with their king. They would have had to pay a cowardice tax. History shows that these cycles do not usually end well. Damage could be mitigated by early and meaningful tax reform. But history also shows that this does not happen easily. Such reform is normally precipitated by some kind of crisis. All but the strongest politicians take the path of least resistance, which is to tinker around the edges while heading in the general direction of more taxes, greater complexity and higher rates. It takes a politician of rare strength and fortitude to attempt such reform and win a mandate for it. without the weight of extreme circumstances on his side. But as Asia marches relentlessly forward, the West, particularly Europe, must change the way it taxes its people if it doesn't want to get left behind. The ideological struggle between large government and small, between authoritarian and libertarian, between old business practices and new tech, between more taxes and fewer taxes, high taxes and low taxes will continue. Neither side will roll over voluntarily. But those nations that opt for low, fair and simple systems of tax will be the ones that thrive. Where taxes are lowest, and thus where people are most free, is where we will see the most invention, the most innovation, and the greatest wealth creation. This has been the case throughout history, and it will always be the case. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe to my channel, and I'll be back with a new video very soon.